Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we'll be reviewing A Quiet Place Part 2. A Quiet Place Part 2 is once again directed by John Krasinski and stars Emily Blunt, Cillian Murphy, and Millicent Simmonds. Picking up right after the events of the first film, A Quiet Place Part 2 shows the family venturing out into the outside world as they continue their silent fight for survival. So Matt, what did you think of A Quiet Place Part 2?
I really did enjoy this movie. I thought this was a fantastic follow-up to the first one. The actors were fantastic in this movie. Of course, you have Emily Blunt, but there's Millicent Simmonds and Jupe, which plays the two kids. And these kids are fantastic, and they're great in this movie, just like they were great in the last movie. This movie was thrilling. I loved how it kept me on the edge of my seat. I was definitely afraid at so many moments during this movie. I was like half covering my eyes, like, because you kind of know what's going to happen, that something's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen, but you know something's going to happen. And the tension, John Krasinski, props in this movie. He just knows so well, just like the first movie, to build this tension. And, you're waiting for it, and he really drags you on, and then you're kind of hit with it. And when it does hit, it's gory. It is, at times, it's gory. At times, it makes you, tense up in fear. And so he just did a fantastic job with that. I really enjoyed myself in this movie.
Yeah, I think it's a really effective sequel. I think it's maybe just a notch below the first one, but it's like just a notch below that it's not even worth quantifying. It's like so close to as good as the first movie that, like I said, it's not even worth quantifying. I think the first 15 minutes is maybe the best 15-minute stretch of the two films put together. The first film was kind of a smaller budget. It was very kind of simple story, and it was better because of all of those things. It really had to think on its feet from a screenwriting perspective and from a directorial perspective. This film obviously has a bit more money behind it, but it uses it very well, including that opening sequence, which kind of shows us day one of when this actually happens. It is able to manufacture all of these situations that are just so tense. And after you saw the first film, you were so impressed with its creativity. And the fact that they were able to do it once again for another 90 minutes of these kind of creatively designed sequences of tension. There's so many great scenes of like, oh gosh, don't step on that, don't touch this, like don't walk through that fence. All of these little things that when you're in the theater, you're just like this, you're so tense. It's great.
Yeah, and you really do notice the budget increase in this movie, and I think most of that is there's so many more monsters. You get these aliens are kind of everywhere now, and you see more of them, and they're more involved in the movie, whereas last time it was definitely more of a family movie. I think, you weren't talking about quantifying the two movies and how this was a notch below, and I'm going to quantify a little bit because I think the reason this movie was just a notch below for me than the first one is because I felt like the first one had a little bit more heart to it.
Yeah,
like the family dynamic was a little bit more in play and kind of visible in that movie, and this movie it kind of takes a little bit of a step back because we've already been introduced to these characters. We already know who they are. So they don't really have to focus as much on character development in this movie.
It's also probably not a spoiler to say that a lot of the screen time, they're apart from one another. They're all on kind of separate journeys doing different things. So I think that kind of adds to it. It doesn't lack a heart, but you're right. It's not as emotionally resonant as the first film was. It also can't bank on its novelty, the first film.
No, I totally agree with that, and I think that's a great direction that they took this movie in, is that these kids are just so much more independent now, and they have a method in which they could fight these aliens. So you see that on play. You just see they're fearful for their lives, but at the same time there's this confidence there that wasn't there in the first movie, and I think they balanced those emotions very well, whether they were in a fearful state or whether they were confident.
I want to go back to John Krasinski a little bit. The direction of this movie is really great. That opening prologue has so many great sequences within it of camera work that just builds all of this tension. There's a scene towards the end where we're cutting between multiple tense storylines and they're all like perfectly matching up with each other in the editing, and it was just really great. Like I was very impressed. I think he's really evolving as a director.
Yeah, I think the way this movie ended, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I was so happy with it.
Yeah.
But going back a little bit to the beginning, that first opening sequence, one of the coolest things they did was the way they shot their car scenes, the driving scenes in this movie, and everything that was happening around the car. I found that so unique, and that particular clip from the beginning was in the trailer where Emily Blunt's driving the car and you see the alien in the bus and she's like backing up, and it's such a cool shot, and I thought it was so cool in the trailer, and it plays out so nicely in this movie, and it's longer too, so you get to see more of it, and it's more involving, and it happens multiple times in the movie to such a great effect.
Yeah, so what that shot does is we've all seen shots that are Like it's a cool oneer. It's one shot. They're not cutting. They're in a car. Like Children of Men kind of comes to mind, where I'm just like, oh, this is really cool, but I don't know if it's serving the story. Whereas here, it really serves the story because I legitimately feel like not only are the characters in danger, but the actors are in danger. Like there's that scene where in the car that you're talking about where she drives towards the bus, and I'm just like, I can't see a way that they did this without actually driving a bus at her, you know? So it really builds the tension. It's great.
There's a lot of shots in this movie where a character is like in the foreground, but there's something happening in the background. And the camera is focused on what's happening in the background, but you still see the actor in the foreground reacting at the same time, even though they're not in focus. And I think that's just the coolest way to shoot some of these sequences, especially when the aliens are taking over the town when they first arrived. I thought that was just fantastically done.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And it's particularly resonant because we'll go from a perspective of a hearing person and everything going on around them to Reagan's perspective where she can't hear, and the film will just go completely silent as we're seeing in the background that there's danger lurking all around her that she's not aware of. And juxtaposing between those loud noises in the hearing world with the deaf world, I think was particularly effective.
And also on top of that, I mean, these sequences kind of just go one into another. This is a really fast-paced movie from a sense. There isn't really much downtime. It's a very condensed film, so it feels kind of short, but like the first movie, I would not take a single thing out of this movie. All right, so you ready to go to grades?
Yeah, I gave it a B+. I think the only thing I could say is because it's so short and condensed, and in some ways this might feel like they'll probably make a third movie and perhaps this is a middle chapter. It can feel kind of slight when you think about what actually happened in this movie is actually not very much. Not a big deal for me, but I can understand how maybe that would affect somebody.
All right, so I give this movie an A-. I really enjoyed myself. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I thought it was a wonderful follow-up to the first movie. I don't know, I'm excited. I hope they make a third one because I just think John Krasinski is doing such a great job with this kind of series.
I agree. I think they took everything that was great about the first movie and they evolved, which is exactly what you want out of a sequel. And that's it for a review of A Quiet Place Part 2, which is now playing in theaters. What did you think of A Quiet Place Part 2? Let us know in the comments and we'll see you in the next one.